Welcome to TISO Consulting Group's DEI podcast series, Why Is It So Hard? Shining Through the Shadow of Resistance. I'm Dr. Tanya Breland.
And I am Erica Leek.
Welcome back. We're so happy that you came back to join us. I am Dr. Tanya Breland.
And I'm Erica Leek. And this is our podcast, Why Is It So Hard? Shining Through the Shadows of Resistance. In this podcast series, as many of you know, we discuss issues that prevent us from being socially just and free. And the goal is to disrupt the status quo of racial inequality and inequity in systems. So those inequities and inequalities that we don't even see anymore because they're so ingrained and systemic, we want to disrupt those. Like, it's possible to change. And that really is how we challenge ourselves. Like, how can we be the change that we want to see? How can we disrupt these policies that are inequitable and these practices that result in racial inequality? That really is the focus and the challenge of our work together.
It is.
So thank you for joining us again. We are in episode 3, really,
Yes.
part 3 of our DEI Back to School series. And so our work today is entitled
A World of Difference.
A World of Difference.
Yes. And what we really would love for you to do is not only as you watch and listen to this podcast, tag a friend and let them hear it or watch it. Feel free to, if you haven't already subscribed to our YouTube channel, TISO Consulting Group, subscribe to our channel as well.
There you go.
And please share this podcast and engage in dialogue with us around the topics. So, a world of difference.
Yeah.
So, in our last episode, we introduced the social justice standards for educators. And in those standards, we spent some time focusing on identity. So, today, we want to really focus on diversity.
Diversity.
So, ergo, a world of
World
difference.
of difference, diversity.
Yes. So let's start with the first of the diversity standards, number 6, if you will. It's not number 6 to us, but number 6 to the standards.
Yeah.
And it's students will express comfort with people who are both similar to and different from them, and engage respectfully with all people.
I think that's really important. And I love that they, in the standards, they kind of called out comfort, right? Because we're so used to being uncomfortable with what we don't know. And so I think this allows kids, and we teach kids comfort. Like,
Right.
it is okay
Right.
that this person moves or looks or speaks or, interacts differently.
Yeah, I remember reading about a situation or circumstance where a child was in the store with their parent, and the child was a white child, and they saw an older Asian man in the store, and the child made some kind of comment about the man's eyes. And the mother was mortified by it. And I might be mixing the story up slightly, but the mother was really upset that her young child had pointed out the difference in the man from her. And rather than the parent using this as a teachable moment with her child, she was embarrassed and, tried to shush the child and, like, it's a problem to recognize the difference. Well, the truth is we're all different, in so many different ways. And if we can get society, and it really does start in schools, with children, if we can get children to get to a place where they are comfortable having conversations about students' differences, we can really make some strides in society. So again, let's go back to that little scenario. If that mother had said, hey, that man, does have eyes that are different from us, it's because the man is probably from His family's origin probably comes from a different ethnic group. Maybe he'll share a little bit about it, and maybe there could have been a conversation about it. But what the parent, by shushing her child, she basically sent a message to the child that it's not okay to see difference in people.
I think that's really important, right? To address it when it comes up.
Right.
So, like you said, like what if that mom would have said, yes, his eyes are different from yours. His eyes are beautiful and so are yours.
Right.
Like even if you don't want to dwell on it, it's okay, but acknowledge it.
Right.
Acknowledge it. And I think that we've been taught that recognizing difference is rude.
Right.
And I think letting kids know that, no, you can recognize it and celebrate it. And yeah, I mean, in all ways, we're similar in some ways and different in others. And the different in others is okay.
Right.
But I think that creates like this discomfort around difference, which is unfortunate because kids notice difference. We notice difference.
They notice difference very, very young.
Yes.
They notice difference like probably before they have language to even discuss it.
Right.
And it's how we as adults act. They learn from us.
Yeah.
So they learn whether or not it's okay to notice the differences among groups of people. And when we don't embrace that, and in education, we haven't done the best job in embracing differences.
No, and I think, one of the areas I think in schools that come, and I think just in life that comes up is like hair texture.
Yes.
Right? So like it's just, there's such an array and a diversity of types of hair and ways of managing and caring for it, right? And so one of the challenges, I think, and I can only speak as an African American female, but one of the challenges is like, when you go into spaces very often, particularly if you're in the minority, you're automatically going to be different in some way, in somehow, and so it related to your hair. And one of the things I think I really loved doing when I was teaching, it's just really talking about hair. Like we would just have with my students, we would just have lots of really good conversations. But I think what it did for my Black girls was kind of open up the conversation to like, you're included in this too, so, because I can remember like in a very young, early elementary, and having like how they send like a health lesson with the nurse or something like that or whatever.
Yeah.
And I can remember her saying things like, because I remember I was like, okay, but she was saying like, so when you wash your hair every day, remember to, like, I don't wash my hair every day, and sometimes you may have to ask mommy or daddy for help, with detangling those long, locks or those tangles or whatever. Like, my mother always does my hair. What do you mean sometimes? It's like those kinds of things, right? So there was this real disconnect between what my experiences were and the experiences that nurse was speaking to,
Sure.
And so I think those kinds of things, but what I tried to do with my Black girls in that space was just, and I wore my hair natural at a time where, it was like 2009. There wasn't a whole lot of natural hair just yet. We were just kind of,
what do you mean by natural?
Thank you. So for African American women, very often we process our hair in some ways to straighten it.
Right.
So I stopped wearing my hair straightened chemically in 2003. And so at that time, there wasn't a whole lot of, African American girls specifically wearing their hair, not chemically straightened. And so they had a lot of questions about it. How did you do that? What do you do? How do you keep it? Or, those kinds of questions. So very often I remember standing outside of the hallway, Miss Leek, I love your hair. How do you do that? And we would carry that conversation into the classroom, which would be fine. And then people would start talking about like, oh my God, that's, but it was a wonderful space of safety, and the difference was okay. And we didn't not talk about it, and it's okay because everybody has hair, right? So, But I think that that's really important so that kids can say, here's how I'm different, and this is what I do in this difference. And I think you make it not rude and make it not taboo to talk about those differences.
Yeah, there was a scenario in the Learning for Justice standards, in their standards, they actually had a scenario about hair. And that scenario was like a young elementary child, and the children had come back from the weekend, and the question was, how was your weekend, or what did you do this weekend? And the little girl says, oh, I got my hair done, and I got to sit for hours or whatever. And the other children didn't know what she meant by that, and she explained that it was an opportunity for her to be with like her mom and other women in her community, and so I took it that from the example, there was a little black girl who probably was getting her hair braided, which can take hours, and getting your hair braided is in and of itself an experience for black girls and black women, and it's a community experience, and it's like a learning opportunity. It's like you're really like sitting with the elders, if you will, and
and you hear all the tea.
Engaging in all kinds of conversation, or you're listening.
All of it.
Yes. And it really is a cultural experience.
It is.
And so if that child comes in and expresses, this experience she had with her hair, other cultures may not understand that experience.
That's
and
right.
The teacher has an opportunity to say, let's explore this a little bit more. Maybe find a book that deals with hair texture, or even just allow the little girl to share more about her experience. That could be really powerful in creating comfort about hair. Because even when you were giving that example about the nurse, like, I wonder if you had said to the nurse, or if you felt comfortable, could you have said to the nurse, hey, I've never washed my hair every day. I can't relate to that. We wash our hair, as black people, we might wash our hair once a week, once every other week. It's because of the oils in our hair. It's like, we're not, it'll dry our hair out if we wash our hair out too many times in a given week, or what have you. And so, that's a conversation of differences.
That's right.
That's right. Hair happens to be something where differences really become noticeable.
Yeah. Well, no, at 6, and again, I was taught to not go against authority, right? And so that wouldn't have been a question. But I do think, though, that empowering kids to, notice difference and be comfortable with noticing it and talking about it, I think is really important, because I think in those spaces, had there been an adult that could, respond, I probably would not have felt so left out, of those kinds of conversations. So, and in that context where, they clearly were not talking to my experience.
So let's look at some of the other standards. So number 7, students would develop language and knowledge to accurately and respectfully describe how people, including themselves, are both similar to and different from each other and others in their identity group. So you might recall in our last episode, we talked about identity groups. So if you didn't have a chance to watch that, we encourage you to go back and look at our previous episode where we did talk about identity groups. We spent the whole episode talking about it. And so here we're really talking about something, we've kind of said this already, but developing the language and the knowledge piece, that again takes intentionality on the part of the teacher to create that space where it's good and it's okay and it is just a natural part of our classroom conversation for us to be able to recognize where we are different and where we are similar, and it's all good.
I think that's really important, because we have so many offensive terms for differences, differences in hair, differences in skin color, differences in body types,
and
abilities. Like the list is unfortunately quite long. But I think when we teach kids like how to refer to these differences that people bring with them, including their own,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Then I think we do get to a place where we can talk about it and it not be uncomfortable, right? So I think that's really important,
Yeah.
that they have the right language.
I think the challenge is adults aren't comfortable.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
And adults don't have the right language,
you're right.
you know?
You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Because how many times have you and I sat with adults, educators, leaders,
Yeah.
to have
Yes.
conversations that really put an emphasis on some of the differences, and we get radio silence?
That's right. That's right. I mean, that has happened like over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because people don't have the language. And in our society, we haven't, I think we're trying to work towards it, but we're having some setbacks around some of the polarity that we're experiencing now. But I think we have not kind of gotten to the place where we give people grace to make mistakes. Like sometimes people say things because they don't have the language. So if we say like, here's the language, right? And now we can talk about it and we can kind of exchange, and I can give you the grace to make a mistake, and you can have the reflection to say, I'm sorry, I didn't realize that.
Right.
Thank you so much.
Right. That's
and then we can
culture,
go
though.
on. That's right.
I mean, that's that's a part of the climate and culture
That's
in
right.
a classroom.
That's right.
Or in an environment where we are intentional about creating this environment where students can express
Yeah.
themselves. Like for example, if they want to talk about what their pronouns are, and people might not understand
Right.
their pronouns,
Right.
like it's incumbent upon the teacher to set this environment where that's a comfortable conversation
That's
for
right.
students to have,
Right.
even where there may be questions, or students may not understand it, or they may have opposition, like that there can be respectful dialogue, which
Right.
brings us to number 8.
Which is students will respectfully express curiosity about the history and lived experiences of others and will exchange ideas and beliefs in an open-minded way. Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
that's
and
a
yes.
tough one.
But it's
You know
so
word
worthy.
really stands out to me.
Wow.
Guess.
Open-minded.
Open-minded. Well, because we have belief systems. And, if I have a belief, or if a student expresses a belief that seems to be contrary to another student's belief, it's easy for for one or the other of those students to shut one another down,
Yeah.
rather than being open and listening and learning.
Yes.
It doesn't mean that they're trying to create a situation where you have to believe what I believe,
Yeah.
but it's, can we have dialogue about the differences even in how we believe? We think about, like you and I have recently had an opportunity to go to a Jewish synagogue, and in going there, we know that based upon our Christian beliefs, there are some things that we believe that they don't believe.
That's right.
There are areas where there are some similarities, but then there are areas where there's some clear differences. And for us to be able to celebrate the differences,
Yeah.
as well as understand and celebrate the areas where we are similar, it's more powerful, I think, when we can be different. And I mean, quite honestly, we think about Jesus. He was good for sitting around folks who were not like him.
Yes. Yes.
That was like
That's
his
right.
thing.
That's right.
Okay, you're an outcast. Yep, I'm gonna sit with
Let's
you.
go. That's
People
right.
think ill of you. Yep, I'm gonna sit with you. I'm gonna eat with you even. And he was, given all kinds of grief as a result. Now, this is not a Bible study or anything, but I wanted to share that because we often will, sit in our seats of judgment and think, because we have a belief about something, that someone else is less than or othered because they may be different in some way. And that's what dominant culture often does in society, is other people who are different,
Yeah.
who think differently, who believe differently, who look different, who have different abilities, and they're othered in some form or fashion. And what this particular standard is saying is, how do we get to a place where we can have some curiosity? Like, I'm friends with some people in the Muslim faith, and it's a much richer relationship when I can ask a question,
Yes.
About Islam that I would not otherwise understand because it's not what I have grown up in. It's not my experience. And I can learn from listening.
That's
and
right.
it's like, oh, okay, I had no idea.
Yeah.
And the same thing can happen in classrooms, but we've got to create spaces, safe spaces, brave spaces for students to be able to engage in that kind of dialogue.
Yeah, and I think that definitely I see kind of number seven, which is the one we talked about, developing the language. I see that as a part of this one, so that as I'm sort of, engaging in this curiosity and asking questions, I have the language to ask the question. Right. And so that gives me the space to enter into dialogue because I think sometimes people ask a question and they ask it offensively.
Yeah.
And
or
judgmentally. So they're curious, but then it comes with offense and judgment. And then we can't get to the place where we're in dialogue and we're open-minded because the question itself implies judgment and offense, right? And so if we don't sort of align those two, the language and also the respect and curiosity together, then I think we can't get to a place where we have this sort of open-minded dialogue. And I think that language piece is so important. But going to number 9, students will respond to diversity by building empathy, respect, understanding, and connection.
That right there.
Yeah. And I think when we think about difference, what's missing when we think about difference and engage in difference is empathy, respect, understanding, and connection. Because we're so used to looking for the common ground.
Always.
So if there's common ground, then I can have empathy for you.
Yep.
Then I can have respect for you. Then I can understand, and then I can connect.
And then I can like you.
And then I can like you.
Right.
But if there's difference, like how do we do that out of difference, I think is really important.
Yeah. And that's really, I think, super important in a classroom.
Yes.
Yes. If you think about teachers that you've had and classrooms that you've been in as either as a student or as an adult going in, in an observatory kind of way, you can kind of feel the difference in a room where there's that respect for diversity versus when there's not. There's a tension in the rooms where diversity is not respected. And I think because we live in a world of differences, we've got to do better in schools in creating that environment for students.
Yes, I agree.
And then let's go to number 10. Students will examine diversity in social, cultural, political, and historical contexts rather than in ways that are superficial or oversimplified. Whoa.
I think that's really, really huge. And I think that examination, like, let's take a look at this, like, let's open this up, I think is really, really it's wonderfully aspirational. And really important.
Yeah. And not shunning children for asking the hard questions, but rather creating an environment where they can ask the hard questions, which is what that examination is all about. In a culturally responsive classroom, students should learn how to examine their socio-political world. So let's look at what's going on in the world around us. And these are conversations that you're having with children in the classroom in a safe and respectful way, with parameters of respect and empathy and understanding and connection being there. But really getting students to look at, we tend to shun political conversations. So society says, in polite society, you don't talk about race, you don't talk about politics, you don't talk about religion. Why?
Right.
Because that's where the differences
Yeah.
lie in people.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't, apparently in society, I can't have a conversation with you if you don't align with my political views, or if you don't align with my religious views,
Yeah.
or if you don't align with my social or cultural views. You know, that's what society has done to us.
And it's unfortunate because when we do, like the standard says, it's superficial or oversimplified.
It
And
is.
so we don't walk away having learned
Nope.
anything. We don't walk away with an appreciation
No.
because we've oversimplified it, right? Or it's really superficial. And in fact, any assumptions that we kind of walked in with are,
Reinforced.
are reinforced.
Mm-hmm.
And so now we believe them even more deeply.
Mm-hmm.
And it's unfortunate because it really creates such a division,
Mm-hmm.
and we're not really able to have that, go back to that previous standard that says, we're not able to build empathy,
Right.
respect, understanding, and connection as long as our examination is superficial and oversimplified.
Yeah, yeah. I think that if we can get educators to be more comfortable, even amongst themselves. So, what we've had challenges with in our trainings, oftentimes we've had challenges getting the adults to have those conversations
Yeah,
where they are
that's right.
examining the diversity
That's right.
in culture and
Yeah.
social and political and historical context. Like the adults can't do that.
Mhm,
Like it's
mhm.
like those are the undiscussable conversations that,
Mhm.
or undiscussable topics, if you will,
Yes.
that are out there, that we get this silence from the adults.
Yeah.
So if the adults can't talk about it, how are we going to get the kids to talk about it?
I mean, like that's just it. And the truth is that we don't.
Right.
And we continue to perpetuate this cycle
Right.
of really sort of the inability to have these really
Right.
deep conversations that free us from these imposed restrictions, and continue to say things like, well, we connect through our common bonds. It's like, well, we can also connect through our differences too.
Right.
Right. And when that happens, the connection is actually deeper. The
is.
relationship is better.
It is.
Right. And the
Yeah.
understanding
And there's an understanding.
is more complex.
Mhm.
But I think that when that happens in the classroom, so when you get to the space in the classroom where kids are connecting through difference and you're connecting with them through like, what a wonderful space, safe space of learning. Like those kids can do anything, and they
Right.
will do anything for
Exactly.
you,
Right.
right? And that's really important, I think, when we understand the connection between that and learning.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I keep going back to, in my head, I was going back to just what we always say in the beginning. Like our goal here is to disrupt the status quo of inequality and inequity in systems.
Yeah.
As long as we're not talking about those inequities, then, the longer we don't talk
Yeah.
about those inequities, the more they exist.
That's right.
And if we can't talk about our socio-political, cultural, historical experiences in classrooms, then we can't disrupt the status
That's
quo.
right. That's right.
It's not possible.
That's right.
Because the status quo is going to continue because there aren't conversations happening in classrooms. And here's the thing, the conversations can happen in elementary school, middle school,
That's
and of
right.
course in high school.
That's right.
We tend to assume that the young ones can't have these conversations. But those conversations are really important.
They are, very much so.
Yes.
Very much so. I mean, you literally teach kids very, very young. You teach them about respect and curiosity.
Right.
Very young. You teach them to look at the context of a situation very young.
Right.
Right? So
Right.
that when they're, in high school and we get upset because these kids seem so apathetic, or, which is what I've heard a lot of. And possibly, that's something that they've learned at home and at school. We don't talk about difference.
It's like learned apathy.
Yes, exactly.
Mhm.
And so it's hard to expect that of them when we haven't really taught them and allowed them the safety in that in the context of school to do it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this is a conversation that we really hope you gravitate to, and that that you're challenged by.
Yeah.
But not challenged in a way that you shut down, but challenged in a way that makes you want to do more and to be more intentional about creating these open spaces of dialogue. And even if you're not able to have those conversations with your students, maybe you should think about how you can have those conversations with adults.
Yeah.
And I think if you can have those conversations with adults and have it in a way that brings about empathy, respect, understanding, and connection, you then can transfer that into the classroom as
That's
well.
so true. I think that's really, really good. If this is something that you practice in your own practice as an educator, we'd love to hear some of the ways that you do it.
We would.
If you're not sure about it, we've given you some insight into maybe places to start, and we do invite you to listen to previous podcasts, particularly the one before this on identity, and the cultural mismatch episode is really good too. In fact, this series is just a good series. But we also want you to know that there are some really good resources at learningforjustice.org around sort of the implementation of these standards. But we thank you for joining us. We look forward to seeing you in the next episode. But until then, I'm Erica.
And I'm Tanya. Thank you again.